The human soldier woke slowly, his mind heavy and his body sore. The first thing he felt was the cold, hard surface beneath him, and the quiet hum of distant machinery. He opened his eyes and found himself in a small, dimly lit med bay. The walls, made of smooth silver metal, with faint blue lights running along the edges. He did not remember how he got here, only flashes of battle, gunfire, shouting, and a burning pain in his side. Now, everything was silent, except for the steady throb. In his body, his gaze moved around the room, searching for someone, anyone. There were no doctors, no other patients. Only a few floating med drones that beeped softly and hovered at the corners. The air smelled faintly of medicine and something unfamiliar, like wildflowers mixed with the sharp scent of metal. Then, the door hissed open with a quiet slide, and his breath caught. A small figure stepped in, a Beastwoman, no taller than his chest. She had short, soft fur that shimmered under the light, ears that twitched like a cat's, and eyes that glowed gold with an almost predatory shine. Her uniform was tight and white, marked with the symbol of a nurse. But the way she moved was not like any nurse he had seen. She was graceful, yet dangerous, her steps light and silent, as if she could vanish in a blink. Her long tail swayed lazily behind her, but her sharp claws clicked softly against the medbay floor. The soldier felt his muscles tense, his instincts telling him to be ready. But before he could say a word, she stopped at the side of his bed and looked at him with steady eyes. Her voice was calm, low, and oddly commanding. Relax, human. The words were simple, but the way she said them made it sound less like advice and more like an order. He did not move, unsure if he should obey or resist. Without waiting for his answer, she reached out and pressed her hand against his chest. Her palm was warm, claws lightly tapping against his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt. He felt his heart beat faster, not from fear exactly, but from something strange in her touch. Her eyes studied him closely, as if measuring his strength, his injuries, and perhaps something deeper. It was the kind of gaze a hunter gave to prey, careful, calculating, but not cruel. The medbay felt even quieter now, the hum of the station loud in his ears. The soldier glanced at the drones, expecting them to move in, but they stayed still. This Beastwoman seemed to be in control here. Then, without warning, she climbed onto the side of the bed. Her movements quick and sure. She was so small compared to him. Yet she moved like she owned the space around him. Her knees pressed into the mattress as she leaned over him, her golden eyes never leaving his face. The soldier swallowed hard, feeling every muscle in his body tense. Her tail flicked once, brushing against his arm, and she tilted her head slightly. "You're hurt deeper than the machines can see," she murmured, her voice low but clear. "I'll fix that." The soldier opened his mouth to ask how, but she placed one clawed finger gently against his lips. Her touch was surprisingly soft, almost careful, but her gaze was sharp. "You talk too much," she said, and then she began moving her hands over his body, checking each injury with slow, deliberate care. Her fingers were warm, and wherever she touched, the pain seemed to ease just a little. It was unlike any treatment he had felt before. He noticed the faint marks on her arms, thin scars that crossed her fur like pale lines. They were not the marks of an ordinary medic. These were the marks of someone who had fought, someone who had survived battles of her own. She was not just a nurse, she was a warrior too. And that made him wonder, why was a warrior nurse treating him personally, and why here? In a medbay that felt more like a hiding place than a hospital, her eyes flicked briefly toward the door, her ears twitching as if she heard something far away. For a moment, her expression changed, becoming sharper. Then she looked back at him and gave the smallest of smiles. "You'll be fine," she said softly, but her tone carried a hidden meaning he couldn't read, and before he could think further, She shifted closer, her face only inches from his. The soldier's breath caught in his chest. There was something about her, the quiet confidence, the way she moved without fear, the strange mix of care and danger in her presence. She was unlike anyone he had met before, human or alien. And as her hands continued to work over his injuries, he realized he had no idea whether he was truly safe. Because this tiny Beastwoman nurse might be healing him, or she might be preparing him for something far more dangerous. But either way, she had his full attention now. The Beastwoman nurse stayed close, her small frame moving with a mix of speed and patience. She reached for a silver tray at the side of the bed, pushing aside the hovering med drones as if they were nothing more than annoying flies. The drones beeped in protest, their lights flashing, but she ignored them completely, her golden eyes focused only on the soldier. "You are not stable yet," she said, her voice firm. "I will fix you my way." The human frowned, his voice hoarse as he asked, "Your way?" She nodded once, her tail curling behind her. "My species heals differently," she replied. "Machines can't read our energy, and they can't share it." He didn't know what she meant, but the certainty in her voice made it hard to argue. Before he could speak again, she climbed back onto the bed without hesitation. She knelt beside him, her claws carefully avoiding his skin, her fur brushing lightly against his arm. Every movement she made was controlled, deliberate, as if this was not the first time she had done this. Her hands hovered over his chest before pressing down gently. A strange warmth began to spread through his muscles, slow at first, then deeper. The pain in his ribs eased slightly, and he realized her touch was doing more than simple examination. He tried to ask if this was some kind of medicine, but she silenced him with a small glare. "You talk too much, human," she repeated, her voice soft but with an edge. She shifted to his injured side, her small hands working over the bruises and cuts with surprising strength. He could feel something flowing from her into him. Not liquid, not heat, but a kind of steady pulse. It was soothing and unsettling at the same time. The soldier studied her as she worked. Her breathing was steady, but her ears twitched at every faint sound outside the med bay. Her movements were quick, efficient, but not rushed. There was a rhythm to her touch, almost like she was channeling her own energy into his body. And with every pass of her hands, his pain faded a little more. He noticed something else too. She had scars, faint but visible beneath her fur. Some were long, like claw marks. Others small and jagged. They told the story of someone who had fought and survived. She was not a sheltered medic, trained in safety. She had seen battle just like him. That made him wonder, why was she here, in this quiet med bay, tending to him instead of fighting at the front? "You're healing faster," she said suddenly. Breaking his thoughts, "It means your body accepts my energy." He blinked at her, unsure how to respond. "My energy," he repeated. She gave a small smile, revealing the faint tips of sharp teeth. "It is the way of my people," she said. "We give part of ourselves to repair another." The idea unsettled him. "Isn't that dangerous for you?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just kept her hand steady over his side. Finally, she said, "Yes, but I have done it before." Her tone was casual, but he could see her tail flick nervously. It wasn't just a healing technique. It was a risk she was willing to take for him. The soldier shifted slightly, trying to understand. He didn't know this alien nurse, didn't know why she was helping him so personally. But her actions were not those of someone simply doing a job. She was committing her strength, her energy, her safety, and for some reason, that made him feel both grateful and uneasy. Minutes passed, and the med bay stayed quiet, except for the hum of the station. The warmth in his body spread further, dulling the ache in his limbs. But he noticed something. Her hands were trembling. Now, she was still working, still focused, but her breathing had grown heavier. "You should stop," he said quietly. She ignored him, pressing harder. "If I stop now, you won't be ready," she murmured. "And you need to be ready, her." Words carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Ready for what? He wondered, but before he could ask, she finished and pulled back slightly. Her eyes scanned his face, her ears twitching again as if listening for something far away. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of tension there. "Better," she said simply, "but not done." The soldier pushed himself up on one elbow, feeling stronger than he had in hours. She didn't seem pleased by his movement. Instead, she leaned in close, her golden eyes locking on his. "This was only a test," she said softly. "You can take my healing, but can you take what comes next?" The question sent a shiver down his spine before he could ask what she meant. A faint sound came from outside footsteps, slow and heavy. Her ears twitched sharply and her tail froze. She glanced at the door. Then back at him. "Stay down," she whispered, her voice suddenly tense, and in that moment, he realized whatever she was preparing him for was about to arrive. The sound outside grew clearer, slow, heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. Each step carried a weight. Like something big was moving closer, the soldier's pulse quickened. And he instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. The Beastwoman nurse stayed still, her golden eyes fixed on the door. Her ears twitched with each sound, her tail lowering until it rested against the bed. There was no panic in her expression, only sharp focus, without speaking. She slid off the bed and moved toward the door. Her steps were so light they made no sound at all. The soldier tried to sit up, but she turned and gave him a look that froze. Him in place, her lips moved in a whisper. "Stay low and trust me." He didn't like the idea of lying still while something dangerous came closer. But there was a tone in her voice he couldn't ignore. It wasn't a request. It was a command from someone who knew survival better than he did. She pressed her ear against the metal door. Listening, outside, the footsteps stopped, replaced by a faint growl, deep and rumbling. It wasn't a sound a normal human throat could make. The soldier's muscles tightened, its body ready to move even without a weapon. The nurse glanced back at him, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. "They're here," she whispered, her voice almost too quiet to hear. Before he could ask who they were, she stepped back from the door and tapped a control panel on the wall. With a soft hiss, the door sealed tighter, heavy locks sliding into place. Then she turned her attention to the ceiling, her gaze scanning the vents above, her body tensed. And he could see she was ready to move at any second. The growl outside grew louder, followed by a scraping sound along the wall. It was as if claws were dragging against the metal. A chill ran down his spine. "What is it?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away, her eyes still fixed on the vent. When she did speak, her voice was steady, but low. "Hunters." He frowned. "Hunters?" She nodded. "Not the kind that chase animals for food. The kind that hunt people?" That answer made his blood run cold. She stepped closer to him, her movements swift and controlled. One clawed hand pressed gently against his chest. Keeping him from standing, "You're not ready to fight them yet," she said firmly. "I barely healed you enough to move." He didn't like the thought of being helpless, but her tone left no room for argument. Instead, he asked, "Why are they after you?" Her gaze flickered, just for a moment, before she said, "Because my kind is valuable to them." The way she said valuable made his stomach twist. He understood now. She wasn't talking about rescue or recruitment. She was talking about capture. The hunters outside weren't here for him. They were here for her. A sudden thud shook the door, followed by a hiss. The sound of claws scraping at the lock filled the medbay. The nurse's ears flicked sharply. And she turned toward the bed. Without warning, she climbed back up, placing herself over him. It wasn't a playful move. It was a shield. Her small frame pressed against his as she positioned herself between him and the door. If the hunters broke through, she was going to take the first strike. He could feel the tension in her muscles, the way her breathing slowed. This was not just a nurse tending to a patient. This was a warrior preparing to protect someone at any cost. The warmth of her earlier treatment was still in his body, but now it mixed with the cold realization that they were trapped. And if those hunters came in, escape would be almost impossible. The scratching at the door stopped suddenly. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The soldier held his breath, his ears straining to catch any hint of movement. The nurse didn't move, didn't relax. Her golden eyes were locked on the entrance. Then, faintly, from the ceiling above them, came a metallic creak. She reacted instantly. A caw. Twisting her head to look up, her tail lashed once, and she whispered, "There in the vents." The soldier's mind raced. They could drop down at any second before he could say anything. She slid off him and moved to the corner of the room, her claws extended fully now. Glinting under the medbay lights, she looked back at him and said, "No matter what happens, you stay down until I tell you to move." The ceiling groaned again, and a shadow passed over the vent cover. The soldier's heart pounded in his ears. He could see the tension in the nurse's stance, every muscle ready to spring. The moment the vent began to shift, she crouched low, her claws digging into the floor. He realized she wasn't going to wait for the hunters to attack. She was going to meet them head-on, and for the first time since waking up, he understood something important. This Beastwoman nurse wasn't just treating him, she was protecting him, and whatever was about to happen next was going to test them both in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The vent above them shuddered, metal bending under weight. The soldier's eyes stayed fixed on the shifting panel, his heart pounding harder. With each second, the Beastwoman nurse crouched low, her claws extended, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Every muscle in her small body was tense, like a coiled spring ready to strike. The sound of scraping claws against metal grew sharper. Then, the vent cover dropped with a clang. A dark shape began to push through. Before the soldier could react, the nurse moved. Her body was a blur. Leaping from the corner with a speed that seemed impossible, she slammed into the figure, dropping from the vent, knocking it back before it could land. A deep snarl erupted from the intruder, a sound that vibrated through the floor. The soldier caught a glimpse, long limbs, gleaming black armor, and a head that seemed too wide for its neck. The creature hissed and retreated upward into the vent. The nurse landed lightly, breathing steady but eyes still sharp. "They won't stop," she said, without looking at him. But we bought a few moments. She turned back toward the bed, climbing onto it again. The soldier frowned, still catching his breath. "What are you doing?" "Healing you before the next attack," she replied simply. He shook his head. "I'm fine." "No," she cut him off. "You're not fine. And you won't survive unless I push further." Without waiting for permission, she straddled him, her knees sinking into the mattress on either side of his hips, her hands pressed firmly against his chest. And he felt that strange warmth flood into him again. It was stronger this time, a deep pulse that spread from his ribs to his arms and legs. The ache in his muscles faded, replaced by a heavy, comforting heat. He wanted to ask how she was doing this, but her eyes told him not to speak. Her breathing slowed, her ears tilting back slightly as if she were sinking into some focused trance. The soldier could feel his heart sinking with hers. The steady beat between them matched like a rhythm. His thoughts felt clearer, sharper, but he also noticed something troubling. Her hands were shaking more than before. Her small frame leaned forward until her forehead rested lightly against his. She exhaled slowly, and with each breath, more strength seemed to flow into him. "You're giving too much," he murmured. "I know," she whispered back, "but..." I have too. Her fur was damp with sweat now, her tail flicking weakly behind her. She pressed harder, her claws digging lightly into his shirt. I can carry pain, she said quietly. It doesn't break me. But if you're too weak when they return, we both die. The weight of her words settled heavy in the air. This wasn't kindness for the sake of kindness. It was survival. For both of them, the warmth in his body turned into a surge. It wasn't just healing. It was like she was pushing raw energy into his bones. He clenched his fists, feeling strength return to muscles that had been useless minutes before. But her breathing was growing ragged. You're hurting yourself, he said firmly. She gave a faint smile. Humans hurt themselves for the ones they protect. I learned it from you. That statement caught him off guard. From him. They had barely met, yet she spoke as if she already knew something about human nature. Maybe she had seen humans fight before. Maybe she had watched them survive where others would fall either way. She was tying her fate to his without hesitation. He didn't know if he should feel honored or afraid. Finally, she pulled back slightly, her hands sliding away from his chest. Her golden eyes searched his face. Better, she said, though her own shoulders sagged with exhaustion. The soldier sat up more easily than he had since waking. He felt alive, ready, but she looked drained. Rest for a moment, he said, but she shook her head. There's no time, she replied. They'll come again. And next time, they won't test us, they'll kill us. A faint rumble in the walls made them both glance toward the vent. The noise was back, moving faster this time. She pushed herself off the bed, swaying slightly, but still balanced. Her claws flexed, her breathing steadied. Stay behind me when they drop, she ordered. The soldier reached for the closest object that could serve as a weapon, a metal tray. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She glanced at him once, her expression unreadable. You fight if I fall, she said quietly. The thought sent a jolt through him. He had no intention of letting her fall, not after what she had just done for him. The vent above rattled again. This time, it's the sound of multiple bodies scraped against the metal. The Beastwoman's eyes narrowed. They brought more, she said, her voice calm but hard. The soldier tightened his grip on the tray. Her tail flicked once, her stance lowering like a predator ready to strike. And in that tense moment, the air heavy and the danger close, he realized the truth. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a fighter, a protector, and right now, his only chance at living. Asterisk, the scraping in the vents faded for a moment, replaced by a heavy silence. The Beastwoman nurse didn't relax. Her golden eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, her claws ready. The soldier sat up fully now, his body stronger thanks to her strange healing. He could feel the warmth she had given him still burning in his muscles, but he also noticed her shoulders drooping, her tail moving slower. She had given too much of herself to keep him standing. The moment of quiet gave him a chance to finally ask, "Why are they after you?" Her ears twitched at the question, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to the wall, pressing a panel that dimmed the medbay lights in the softer glow. Her expression looked older, heavier. "My kind is rare," she said. At last, her voice low, "and rare things are hunted." The soldier frowned. Hunted for what? Her eyes flicked toward the door, then back to him. For sport, for trade, for breeding, she said quietly. The words hit him like a cold shock. He understood now why she kept her body tense, why she never turned her back to the entrance. The hunters weren't after her for anything honorable. They saw her as property. She took a deep breath, her tail curling close to her legs. "I was assigned here only because no one else wanted to work in this part of the station," she continued. "They thought it was useless, that the medbay was too far from the main sectors to matter." Her lips curled slightly, almost a bitter smile. "But they didn't know it would save me until you arrived." The soldier tilted his head. "Save you?" How? Her eyes locked on his. You're human, she said simply. And humans are different. He raised a brow. Different how? Her claws tapped lightly against the metal wall. You fight for things that aren't yours. She said, you protect strangers like they are family. You risk yourselves when you have no reason to. Her voice softened slightly. I saw it in you the moment you woke. He shook his head slowly, unsure how to respond. You don't even know me, he said. Her tail twitched. I know enough, she replied. You're the kind who won't run and leave someone behind. The truth in her tone made him uncomfortable. It was one thing to protect a teammate, another to risk his life for someone he had just met. But looking at her now, he knew he couldn't walk away even if he wanted to. She stepped closer, her small form casting a faint shadow over him. If I heal you again, you'll be strong enough to move, she said, and if you can move, you can help me escape. It wasn't a plea, it was a deal. The soldier nodded slowly. All right, he said. But if we get out of here, I'm not leaving you behind either. Her eyes studied him for a long moment before she gave a small nod. Then we are bound, she said quietly. She extended her clawed hand, and he took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong. It wasn't just a handshake. It felt like a promise sealed in the heat of survival. Another faint rumble in the vents made them both turn their heads. The hunters were still moving, still circling. They're testing the defenses, she muttered. They want me tired before they strike again. The soldier glanced at her and saw the truth. She was already tired. Her breathing was steady, but her movements were slower than before. If they attacked now, she'd fight, but she might not win. You said your healing drains you, he said. How much can you give before it kills you? She didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the vent. Finally, she said, enough to save you, but maybe not myself. He clenched his fists. Not good enough, he said. We both get out. Or neither of us does. Her ears twitched. At that, and for a moment, something softer passed over her face. Humans, she whispered, almost to herself, always making impossible promises. The soldier smirked faintly despite the danger, and yet we keep them, he said. She looked at him for a heartbeat longer, then finally turned toward the medbay exit. Then let's prepare, she said, because when they come back, we fight together. The silence in the room felt heavier now, not just because of the hunters outside, but because the truth between them had been spoken. They were no longer just nurse and patient. They were allies, partners, tied together by survival, and as the sound of claws scraping metal returned, louder than before, the soldier knew that whatever was waiting for them outside, they would face it side by side. Asterisk, the medbay door rattled violently. The sound sharp against the silence. The metallic thud echoed through the room, followed by a low growl from the other side. The Beastwoman nurse's ears flattened, her golden eyes narrowing. They're done testing, she said quietly. Now they attack. The soldier stood, his muscles still burning with the strength she had given him. He grabbed the closest thing to a weapon, a heavy metal bar from the broken equipment stand. It wasn't much, but it was solid in his hands. The scratching turned into pounding, each hit denting the door a little more. Sparks flew from the lock as the hunters tried to force it open. The nurse moved quickly, darting to a storage unit and pulling out a small plasma scalpel. Its blade hummed faintly, glowing pale blue. She tossed it to the soldier, who caught it awkwardly. Use it if they get close, she ordered. Aim for joints and throats. A deafening crash filled the room as the door finally burst inward. 3 tall figures rushed inside, their black armor gleaming under the medbay lights. Their faces were hidden behind masks, their claws long and curved. The nurse didn't hesitate. She leaped forward, slashing at the first attacker with a burst of speed. Her claws tore across the creature's arm, making it snarl and stumble back. The soldier swung the metal bar at another, the impact ringing against its armor. It staggered but didn't fall. The third hunter moved toward the soldier from the side, but the nurse was already there, spinning low and hooking its legs with crocquet. With her tail, it crashed to the floor with a metallic thud. "Move!" she shouted, and they both bolted toward the corridor. The hunters roared behind them, their footsteps pounding like drums. The hallway was narrow, lit only by faint strips of red emergency light. Every corner felt like a trap. The nurse darted ahead, her small frame weaving between fallen debris and shattered panels. The soldier followed close, his breathing steady but his grip tight on the scalpel. The air was filled with the smell of burning circuits and something darker, the scent of blood from behind. The hunter's claws scraped the walls, their growls echoing like shadows chasing them. "Where are we going?" The soldier called. "Docking bay." She replied sharply. "If we get there, we can take an escape pod." They turned a corner, only to find two more hunters blocking the path. The nurse didn't slow down. She leaped high, pushing off the wall to land on one's shoulders. Her claws dug deep into its neck as she twisted, forcing it to crash to the ground. The soldier charged the other, slashing with the scalpel at its arm joint. The blade hissed as it cut through, making the creature drop its weapon with a metallic clang. They didn't stop to finish the fight. Every second mattered. The docking bay was still far, and the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The soldier's chest ached, but he pushed himself harder. He realized the nurse wasn't just fast. She was calculating every move, every turn. She knew the station's layout like the back of her hand. But even her speed couldn't keep them ahead forever. "They're closing in," he warned. "I know," she replied. "Hold on to me," without warning. She grabbed his wrist and yanked him toward a maintenance shaft. They slipped inside just as a hunter lunged past the entrance, missing them by inches. The shaft was tight, the metal cold against their hands and knees as they crawled. The sounds outside were muffled, but the danger still pressed close. "Where does this lead?" he asked. "Straight to the bay," she said, her voice steady. "But if they find the hatch first, we're trapped." They reached the end and pushed the hatch open. The bright light of the docking bay spilled over them. Rows of small escape pods lined the walls, most with blinking red lights. The nurse's ears twitched, scanning quickly. "Only one's active," she muttered. Spotting a pod at the far end, they sprinted toward it. But the heavy clang of footsteps echoed behind them again. The hunters had found their way. The soldier reached the pod controls first, his fingers flying over the panel. The nurse spun too, faced the hunters, her claws out, her body crouched low. "Get in," she told him without looking back. "Not without you," he shot back instantly. She didn't argue. Instead, she waited until he was beside her. The first hunter charged, and they moved together. She went low, slashing its legs while he drove the scalpel into its side. The creature collapsed, and they didn't wait for the others. They stumbled into the pod. The hatch ceiling shut behind them. The nurse hit the launch button, and with a deep rumble, the pod detached from the bay. The sudden force threw them back into the seats as the stars outside spun. The soldier looked at her sweat, matted the fur along her neck, but her eyes still burned with fire. They had escaped, but the fight wasn't over. Somewhere out there, the hunters still roamed, and he knew they would follow. The escape pod shook as it drifted away from the station, the faint hum of its engines filling the small cabin. The soldier's breathing was heavy, his pulse still racing from the fight. Across from him, the Beastwoman nurse sat back against the curved wall, her golden eyes half-lidded but still alert. Her tail lay still beside her, its usual flicking gone, a sign of her exhaustion. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence broken only by the soft beeping of the pod's navigation system. Finally, he said quietly, "You saved my life." Her gaze lifted to meet his. "And you didn't leave me behind," she replied simply. He shook his head. "I wasn't going to." A small smile touched her lips. The first real smile he had seen from her since waking up in that medbay. "You're human," she said. Softly, as if that explained everything, he studied her for a moment, taking in the small details he hadn't noticed before. The faint pattern of stripes under her fur, the small scar just below her right ear. The way her ears twitched, even when she was resting. She had fought like a predator, healed like a caretaker, and carried herself like someone who had survived more than most could imagine. And yet, despite everything, she had stayed with him. "Why risk so much for me?" he asked, her eyes held his without flinching. "Because I decided you were mine to protect," she said, her tone steady, "and I don't go back on my decisions." The soldier leaned back, feeling the heat of her earlier healing still humming. Faintly in his body, he remembered the way she had shielded him, the way she had climbed over him in the medbay without hesitation. She had trusted him to stand with her, and he had. That trust was not something he could take lightly. "You're not just a nurse," he said. "No." She agreed. "I'm not outside the small window." The stars shifted slowly as the pod adjusted its course. "Where are we going?" he asked. She shrugged lightly. "Anywhere away from the hunters." She said, "But if they find us, we fight again." He nodded. "Together." That word seemed to ease some of the tension in her shoulders. Her tail twitched once, the faintest sign of comfort. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't the heavy, fearful quiet of the medbay. It was the calm after surviving something deadly. The soldier's thoughts drifted back to the station, to the pounding on the door, the snarls, the metallic screech of claws. It had been chaos, but through it all, she had never wavered. That kind of loyalty couldn't be bought, and it couldn't be faked. After a while, she shifted in her seat, curling slightly to one side. Her golden eyes softened. "Haida," and her voice dropped low. "Told you to relax, human." The soldier chuckled under his breath, the memory of her first words to him flashing in his mind. "I think you've earned the right to say that," he replied. Her ears tilted forward slightly, a sign she was pleased, even if she didn't say it outright. He reached into the small emergency kit beneath the seat, pulling out a thin blanket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. Her head tilted slightly, and she gave him a look that was both curious and appreciative. "You didn't have to," she said quietly. "Neither did you," he answered. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she let out a slow breath, her body relaxing against the wall. Minutes passed, and the hum of the pod became almost soothing. The soldier felt his own eyelids grow heavy, the adrenaline finally fading. But even as exhaustion pulled at him, one thought stayed clear. They were bound now, not by orders or duty, but by choice. He didn't know where they would land or what waited for them, but he knew one thing. With certainty, he wasn't letting her face it alone. She closed her eyes, her breathing evening out. Her tail curled toward him slightly, an unconscious gesture of trust. He leaned his head back, letting the stars outside blur together. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the hunters were still out there, but for now, they were alive, and that was enough. The soldier glanced at her one last time before sleep claimed him. Her small form looked almost peaceful now, the fierce warrior hidden beneath the quiet nurse once more. Yet he knew that if danger came, she would be on her feet in an instant, claws ready, and he would be right there beside her. Because in the fire of battle and the shadow of death, they had forged something that neither claws nor chains could break.